The stolen jewelry box sat in my garage like a loaded gun, waiting for the police to find it. I'm Damian Rivera, 34 years old, and I've spent the last 6 years as a research assistant at the Colorado Environmental Institute. My house sits on Lot 47 in Brook Terrace, a quiet subdivision in Hawks Point, where the biggest drama usually involves someone's sprinkler system hitting their neighbor's driveway. The kind of place where people wave from their driveways and complain about dandelions at HOA meetings. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee at 6. Check emails. Review datasets for the water quality project. The doorbell rang at 7:15, which seemed early for visitors. 2 Hawks Point police officers stood on my front porch. The older one, Officer Martinez, held a clipboard. His partner kept glancing toward my garage. "Mr. Rivera, we received a report about stolen property possibly being stored on your premises." My stomach dropped. Stolen property? What kind of stolen property? Jewelry. Specifically, a vintage jewelry box taken from a home on Maple Ridge Drive 3 days ago. Martinez consulted his notes. "We have a warrant to search your garage." I stepped aside. My hands felt cold despite the morning sun. "Of course, but I have no idea what you're talking about." The garage search took 20 minutes. They found the jewelry box behind my tool cabinet, wrapped in a blue tarp I'd never seen before. Ornate silver with mother-of-pearl inlay. Definitely not mine. "Sir, you're under arrest for possession of stolen property." The handcuffs clicked shut while my neighbor Marcus Hayes watched from his kitchen window. His wife Anna Hayes stood beside him, her face a mask of concern. "They'd been the ones to call it in," Martinez explained. "Saw suspicious activity around my garage the night before. But I'd been at the Institute until 11 that night, running water samples through the spectrometer. My keycard logs would prove it." The booking process felt surreal. Fingerprints. Photos. A holding cell that smelled like disinfectant and fear. My attorney, David Chen, arrived 2 hours later with bail paperwork. "This doesn't make sense," I told him during our brief consultation. "Someone planted that box in my garage." "Can you prove that?" I couldn't. Not yet. The charges were dropped 48 hours later when the real thief was caught trying to fence other items from the same burglary. But the damage was done. Neighbors whispered when I walked to my mailbox. The HOA president, Marcus Hayes, suggested I might want to consider relocating for the good of the community. That's when I started paying attention to the details I'd missed before. The security camera Marcus Hayes had installed the week before the incident pointed directly at my driveway. The fact that Anna Hayes worked as a paralegal and would know exactly how planting worked. The way they'd both been so helpful during my arrest, offering to water my plants and collect my mail while I sorted things out. I started keeping a notebook. Times. Dates. Conversations. The pattern that emerged made my blood run cold. The notebook started small. Just dates and times when I noticed Marcus Hayes checking his security camera. But patterns emerged quickly when you knew what to look for. 3 weeks before my arrest, Anna Hayes had asked to borrow my spare garage door opener. Said theirs was broken and they needed to move some furniture. I'd handed it over without thinking twice. We'd been neighbors for 2 years. They seemed trustworthy. She returned it the next day with homemade cookies and apologies for the inconvenience. I pulled my garage door logs from the Smart Opener app. The device recorded every activation with timestamps. On the night before my arrest, while I was at the Institute, my garage had opened at 11:47 p.m. and closed at 11:52 p.m., 5 minutes. Enough time to plant and leave. The jewelry box theft had happened 6 blocks away on Maple Ridge Drive. I drove past the house and knocked on the door. Mrs. Patterson, the victim, was happy to talk about the burglary. "They took my grandmother's jewelry box and some cash from the bedroom," she said. "Police said it was probably kids looking for quick money." "Did they catch anyone?" "Yes, some teenager from downtown. But he only had the cash when they arrested him. Said he sold the jewelry box to someone else." The timeline clicked into place. The real thief had been caught with the cash, but not the jewelry box. Someone else had acquired it specifically to plant in my garage. Someone who knew about the burglary. Someone with access to police reports. Anna Hayes worked for Morrison & Associates, a law firm that handled criminal defense cases. She would have access to arrest reports and lists. I started documenting everything. The security camera Marcus had installed pointed directly at my property, not his own. The timing of Anna's request to borrow my garage opener. The fact that they'd been the ones to call in the suspicious activity. But I needed more than circumstantial. The Hawks Point Municipal Building housed the planning department where property records were kept. I requested copies of all permits filed for my street in the past 6 months. Marcus Hayes had filed for a security system installation permit 3 weeks before my arrest. The application listed the camera specifications and positioning. The camera angle covered my entire driveway and garage entrance. None of his own property was visible in the coverage area. I filed a Freedom of Information request for the police report for my arrest. The responding officers had noted that the anonymous tip came from concerned neighbors who observed suspicious activity around the suspect's garage at approximately 11:45 p.m. But my garage logs showed the door opening at 11:47 p.m. The timeline was impossible unless the Hayes couple had called in the tip before the suspicious activity actually occurred, or unless they knew exactly when it would happen because they were doing it themselves. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My next-door neighbor on the other side, Marcus Thompson, knocked on my door with a manila envelope. "Found this in my mailbox by mistake," he said. "Looks important." The envelope was addressed to Anna Hayes, but had been delivered to the wrong Marcus. Inside was a receipt from Pawn Palace downtown for the sale of a silver jewelry box with mother-of-pearl inlay, dated 2 days after my arrest. The same jewelry box that had been planted in my garage. Anna Hayes had sold the after it served its purpose. I photographed the receipt and returned the envelope to Marcus Thompson, asked him to deliver it to the Hayes house as if nothing had happened. Then I called Detective Logan Simmons at the County Land Records Office. "I need to report tampering and filing false police reports," I told him. The investigation moved quickly once Simmons had the documentation. The pawn shop had security footage of Anna Hayes selling the jewelry box. The garage door logs proved unauthorized access to my property. The permit records showed the security camera was positioned to monitor my activities, not protect their property. But the most damaging came from Anna's own workplace. Morrison and Associates kept detailed logs of which employees accessed which case files. Anna had pulled the Patterson burglary report the day after the theft, claiming she needed it for a related case. There was no related case. She'd used her professional access to identify that could be planted to frame me. The plan was sophisticated and would have worked if not for digital trails she hadn't considered. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning. Detective Simmons arrived with a warrant while I watched from my kitchen window. Anna Hayes was led away in handcuffs while Marcus stood in their driveway, his face pale with shock. Or maybe it was just shock at getting caught. The arrest was just the beginning. Detective Simmons called me that afternoon to explain the charges. Anna Hayes faced tampering, filing false police reports, burglary, and conspiracy. Each count carried serious penalties. But building the case required more than the pawnshop receipt and security footage. "We need to establish motive and opportunity," Simmons said. "Document everything you can remember about your interactions with the Hayes family." I spent the next 3 days creating a timeline. Every conversation, every favor, every time Anna had been in my house or garage. The pattern emerged clearly once I wrote it down. Anna had been planning this for months. The first sign was her sudden interest in my work schedule back in March. She'd started asking casual questions about my research projects at the university, when I traveled for conferences, how long I'd be away from home. Then came the request to borrow tools from my garage. A level in April. Hedge trimmers in May. Each time, she'd lingered longer than necessary, studying the layout and security measures. The security camera installation in June wasn't about protecting their property. It was about monitoring mine. The angle was perfect to record anyone entering or leaving my garage. Marcus Hayes had been oblivious to his wife's activities. When Detective Simmons interviewed him, he broke down completely. Admitted Anna had been acting strangely for months. Coming home late. Making unexplained phone calls. Claiming overtime at Morrison and Associates that didn't match her actual schedule. The investigation revealed Anna's financial motive. She'd been gambling online for over a year, accumulating debts her husband knew nothing about. The stolen jewelry and electronics weren't random targets. She'd researched their values carefully, choosing items that would bring enough money to cover her immediate debts. Framing me was insurance. If the thefts were discovered, she needed someone else to take the blame. My arrest would have given her time to dispose of and establish alibis. The plan almost worked. Morrison and Associates fired Anna immediately when the charges became public. Her law license was suspended, pending the criminal case. Marcus Hayes filed for divorce within a week of her arrest. But Anna wasn't finished fighting. Her attorney, a slick downtown lawyer named Richardson, tried to shift blame onto me. Claimed I'd planted the pawnshop receipt to frame his client, suggested the security footage had been doctored. Even implied I'd stolen the items myself and was using Anna as a scapegoat. The strategy fell apart when Detective Simmons presented the digital. The garage door logs were stored on secure servers Anna couldn't have accessed. The pawn shop security system was managed by a third-party company with no connection to either of us. The timestamps on all were verified by independent forensic analysts. Most damaging was Anna's own digital footprint. Her phone's GPS data placed her at my house during times when I was at work. Her internet search history showed she'd researched pawn shop locations and jewelry values. Her credit card statements revealed cash advances that matched the amounts she'd received for selling stolen items. The prosecution offered a plea deal in September. Anna would serve 18 months in county jail and pay full restitution for damages and legal costs. She'd also be required to undergo gambling addiction treatment and perform community service. Anna rejected the offer. Her trial was scheduled for November. I testified for 3 hours, walking the jury through the timeline, and, Nacletus. Marcus Thompson testified about finding the pawnshop receipt. Detective Simmons presented the digital and security footage. Anna's defense crumbled when the prosecution called her supervisor from Morrison and Associates. He testified that Anna had accessed the Patterson burglary file without authorization, had printed copies of photos, had asked detailed questions about how stolen property was typically recovered. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Anna to 3 years in state prison, full restitution of $12,000, permanent loss of her law license, 5 years probation after release. Marcus Hayes sold their house in December and moved to Denver. He'd apologized to me repeatedly during the trial, claiming he'd had no knowledge of his wife's activities. I believed him. His shock seemed genuine, and Detective Simmons found no of his involvement. The Brook Terrace HOA held an emergency meeting after Anna's sentencing. Board members were concerned about the security breach and wanted to implement new measures to protect residents. They approved funding for additional street lighting and encouraged homeowners to upgrade their security systems. I installed new locks on my garage and added motion sensors to my existing cameras. The insurance company reimbursed me for the stolen items and legal costs. My employer at the university was supportive throughout the ordeal, even offering to help with legal expenses. But the real victory came from helping other residents who'd experienced similar harassment. 3 neighbors approached me after the trial, describing suspicious activities they'd noticed but hadn't reported. Property line disputes that seemed manufactured, HOA violations that appeared targeted, utility problems that couldn't be explained. I work with local attorneys to provide free consultations for HOA disputes, but it turned out to be a setup. Anna had been running smaller schemes against other residents for months, using her legal knowledge to intimidate people who couldn't afford to fight back. Detective Simmons reopened several cases based on the new information. 2 additional charges were filed against Anna while she was already in prison. Her sentence was extended by another year. The neighborhood felt different after that. Quieter. More cautious. People installed security cameras and upgraded their locks. The casual trust that had defined Brook Terrace was gone, replaced by a wariness that would take years to fade. 6 months later, I received a letter from the Colorado Department of Corrections. Anna Hayes had been denied early parole. Her additional charges for fraud and harassment had complicated her case. She would serve the full sentence. I was working in my garage when the mail arrived. The same garage where she'd planted those stolen tools. I'd converted it into a home office after installing new security measures. The space felt different now. productive instead of violated. The Brook Terrace neighborhood had slowly begun to heal. New residents moved into the Hayes house in February, a young family with 2 children. They introduced themselves properly and seemed genuinely interested in being good neighbors. The HOA implemented the security improvements they'd promised. Motion-activated lighting lined every street. A neighborhood watch program started meeting monthly at the community center. Participation was higher than anyone expected. Detective Simmons called in March with an update. Anna's case had become a training example for the County Land Records Office. They were using it to teach new investigators about document fraud and property harassment schemes. Her methods had been more sophisticated than initially realized. I'd helped 4 more residents file complaints about suspicious activities. 2 cases resulted in civil settlements. One involved a contractor who'd been overcharging for unnecessary repairs after creating fake HOA violations. Another concerned a property management company that had been falsifying inspection reports. The university promoted me to senior research assistant in April. My supervisor cited my attention to detail and investigative skills as key factors. The irony wasn't lost on me. Anna's betrayal had inadvertently improved my career prospects. My security system captured footage of deer wandering through the backyard last week. Normal suburban wildlife instead of criminal activity. The cameras had become a source of entertainment rather than collection. The neighborhood barbecue in May drew the largest crowd in years. People seemed more connected somehow. Shared adversity had created unexpected bonds. We'd learned to look out for each other in ways that went beyond casual pleasantries. Marcus Hayes sent a Christmas card from Denver. He'd remarried and started a new job. His message was brief, but sincere. He thanked me for not holding his wife's actions against him. Some betrayals create collateral damage that extends far beyond the primary victims. I still check my property lines monthly. Old habits from months of investigation. But the anxiety has faded. The measurements always match the official survey. No mysterious fence movements or altered boundary markers. The stolen tools were never recovered. Anna had sold them months before her arrest. But the insurance settlement allowed me to buy better equipment. Professional-grade instruments that would last decades. Spring brought new growth to the neighborhood. Trees that had been damaged during the investigation period were flourishing again. Fresh mulch covered the areas where had been collected. Nature had a way of healing scars that human conflict left behind. I learned something valuable about trust during those months. It shouldn't be given blindly, but it shouldn't be withheld completely either. The key was finding balance between caution and community. The final court documents arrived in June. Anna's appeals had been exhausted. Her conviction was permanent. The legal system had worked exactly as intended, despite the initial setbacks and complications. Brook Terrace felt like home again. Not the naive, unguarded place it had been before, but something stronger. A community that had been tested and survived. We'd learned to protect ourselves without losing our humanity. The silence in my garage was different now. Not the tense quiet of waiting for the next violation or planted. Just the peaceful absence of conflict. The sound of a neighborhood that had found its equilibrium again. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.